Welcome back to the Restaurant Technology Guys podcast. I thank our audience out there for joining each and every time. As I continue to say, you guys have lots of choices on how you guys spend your time. So we appreciate you guys hanging out with us today. Today, we are joined by a member of a team, and I'm going to let Aaron introduce himself a little bit here. It is actually kind of cool, and I'm excited to hear what Aaron has to share just about kind of what they do in his profession. But before we jump into that, Aaron, why don't you give everybody a little bit of an understanding? Who is Aaron? Where did Aaron come from? What's Aaron get to, before we jump into kind of what you get to do for a living, I'd love to understand a little bit more about who Aaron is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, my name is Aaron Bramer. I'm currently director of sales for Thermodyne Food Service Products. I have a background in the culinary and hospitality industry. Worked in a lot of fine dining. Went to culinary school. Have a culinary degree. Worked in a bunch of different restaurants, hospitals, and such. Been in hospitality almost my entire working career from the time I was 14 years old, working small time restaurants, washing dishes, to working in my parents' restaurant growing up as a kid. And the hospitality industry is really about all I've ever known in terms of a workforce. So, it's kind of something that's been embedded in me for years and years. And, went on to get a culinary degree, went on to work in a bunch of different restaurants, actually used Thermodyne products in the restaurants that I worked in. That's kind of how, I got familiar with Thermodyne. And that's kind of how the whole journey for me being on the team now got started. Years ago, I did serve as the corporate chef. And then as things progressed, I did come into the director of sales role here in the past few years and just been kind of working at that ever since.
Very cool. Just because I'll get crap from our listeners, talk to me a little bit about why jumping from being in the kitchen to now working with kitchens on the outside. Because I we tease longtime listeners will have heard me talk about this. I think there's a place for people that were in the restaurants and ultimately had to get out. But I'm sure our listeners would love to know the story. How did that whole thing take place?
Yeah, I mean, the restaurant industry, as anybody will tell you, it's brutal. It can be very, very rewarding. It's a passion, it's a craft. You got to love what you do. But I mean, at the end of the day, it takes a toll on you mentally, physically, emotionally, and it was something that I did for, better part of a decade. And, I loved what I did and I was very good at it. And I met a lot of good people there, worked with a lot of great chefs, had a lot of great partnerships that I had formed, Thermodite being one of them. But, at the end of the day, it was something that put so much stress on the other areas of my life that, things had to change or they were going to go in a downward spiral real quick. So
I'm saying,
had to
or they were
make
going
the,
to change without you being able to have the steering wheel on
yeah,
that. I
exactly.
hear.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Well,
I knew that staying in the hospitality industry was what I wanted to do. So, I mean, having to find a transition that was still kind of in my wheelhouse was something that was definitely on my radar. And, I didn't make a decision quickly or lightly, but at the same time, I knew I needed to make a change.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. So talk to me a little bit about Thermodyne. I've heard the name. I've heard the name in the restaurant industry. I've seen you guys at trade shows, but for those that are less familiar with what it is, like give me a little bit of the origin story if you don't mind, and then we can talk about all of the, quite frankly, ridiculous products that you guys have come to market with over the last number of years. Because I mean, doing a little bit of research on what y'all do, it's insane what you guys do, and I think for somebody that comes out of the culinary background, it's probably a very cool conversation that you can have with people. But tell me a little bit about the origin story. Where's Thermodyne come from? And then kind of what do you guys get to do today as technology continues to advance in the world?
Yeah. So, Thermonite, we've been around about 35 years now. We were originally developed down in Jeffersonville, Indiana, for a guy by the name of Colonel Sanders. If you're familiar with him or not. But the original story was looking for a way to hold fried chicken, and nobody at the time could seem to hold it at a good temperature while also maintaining a good texture. Chicken, it was either coming out soggy or dry or burnt or anything you could think of, and it wasn't maintaining its quality for a set amount of time. So they were patent. The story goes it was the original owner and another scientist down there kind of came up with technology for fluid shelf, realizing that there was a demand for, circulating liquid through tubing, through pipes that could then transfer the heat that way. It was a more stable way of keeping temperature. Whereas you look at, a lot of cabinets that would use heating elements or coils, those would pulse, kind of give you an average temperature, and they would rely on humidity. Whereas with our cabinets, we're solely relying on the conduction heat that we're producing. So kind of what makes Thermodyne different from a lot of our competitors and such is, we're using conduction. Conduction is you're setting something on top of one another, and that heat source from the shelf transferred to the pan, transferred to the food is what's keeping it warm. No fans, there's no circulating of any hot air or any liquid or any humidity in our cabinets, which we feel gives a real advantage for that niche of keeping hot food hot and keeping crispy food crispy. I mean, you go into a fast food restaurant or you go into any kind of establishment and you want, crispy chicken. If it's not crispy, you're disappointed. So we found that was definitely a high demand for certain consumers keeping products the sustainable and optimal texture. So with that, I mean, we pretty much for the past 35 years, we've been mass producing these conduction holding cabinets and cook and hold ovens that, with the way that they're built, with how we're pumping fluid through each shelf and bringing it back up, recycling it and reheating it, we're able to give a much more precise temperature. Whereas, a lot of other cabinets in the industry, they're pulsing to give you more of an average. They're going 10 degrees above, 10 degrees below to hopefully give you more of that average temperature. Whereas we're just heating that liquid to a very precise temperature and pumping it through the cabinet and reheating it. So it's a distinct advantage, kind of the way that our cabinet is set up and how we are using the heating elements in the pump to heat the shells.
So yeah, I literally was writing down questions because I have so much that I want to go through. So talk to me a little bit. So that's really where you guys started. I know you guys have got more products than just the heating shelves, but I'd love to stay on that train of thought to stay here. I guess, you know, I personally, I do enjoy cooking. I've never been to school to cook unless you count YouTube University and or the Food Network. So there's that. But years ago, I remember getting a sous vide for personal use, and I think to myself, when I'm listening to you talk about it, and the sous vide and or these heating elements that put stuff in water, it sounds a little like what you guys are doing. Talk to me a little bit about that because obviously we're talking about commercial kitchens. We're not talking about my kitchen where I'm going to throw 3 chicken breasts into a sous vide, like different totally different element and totally different concept. But talk to me a little bit about, I guess, is it similar? Is it different? Because what I've heard from some chefs about kind of sous vide cooking is it's almost impossible because you've got this boiling hot water that's now in this environment. You can't do that in a kitchen where you got 40 people running around. So I guess how would you equate those two things for those that may be familiar with the sous vide but not with thermodyne and kind of what you guys do?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's still about understanding what you're doing. I mean, what is sous vide cooking? Sous vide cooking is cooking under vacuum, sous vide under vacuum. And basically, you're putting that sealed bag in a temperature controlled water bath that is at a
Mhm.
very precise temperature, which is the same thing that we're doing. We're having a very precise temperature on our cabinetry. I mean, we're heating liquid just like you would in a sous vide machine, and we're flowing it through each shelf. The only difference is when you're cooking in a traditional water bath or immersion circulator, you are heating that liquid that is then encompassing and surrounding the sous vide product. Whereas with ours, you're just setting it, on the shelf. I mean, it's the same concept of we're heating it to a very precise temperature and maintaining that. So, I mean, very, very similar avenues for, an immersion circulator, a sous vide machine compared to a Thermodyne cabinet. Same concept. And we do have a lot of customers that are doing sous vide cooking in our cabinetry. Now, granted, they're not doing, one, two, three chicken breasts here or one pork chop here. They're mass producing prime rib and pork butt and ribs and um, top rounds, big, big pieces of meat that they're cooking hundreds of pounds of every day that, in the sense of trying to cook, 25-pound top round in a sous vide doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
Especially if you're trying to make, 4, 5, 6, 8 of them a day, depending upon what they're doing. It
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense to have them in a water bath like that. But for one of our large cabinets that can hold, 8 top rounds, no problem. Yeah, it's a no brainer. It's definitely a very sought after thing to be able to simplify our process.
Yeah, and that was, I guess, one of my questions as you were going through it. That same chef that I was talking to about sous vide, he happens to run a casual dining brand that has what they call center of the plate proteins, and they used to cook them in a standard oven like you would anything else. You talked about a prime rib, you talked about ribs, both a prime rib and a ribs, and they came out with like a double thick pork chop. Talking with him about that and kind of the format that you used to have is you used to have to put those things in there when you talked about the inception of what you guys were doing, what at least I understood to be is it was a holding, cabinet versus a cooking cabinet. You've now kind of, I guess, converted to cooking. Is it both? Is it a little bit of one and the same? Talk to me a little bit about kind of that because again, one of the things that I love about my own sous vide is, you know what, if I'm 20 minutes late getting my chicken breast, it's not going to ruin it because it's kept at the exact temperature and it's never going over and it's never going under. My understanding from talking to that chef is devices like yours help with that because you've got kitchen staff that gets busy and they forget and such. So talk to me a little bit about difference between holding versus cooking and kind of where you guys are at on that continuum as well.
Yeah, I mean, so just over the years and decades, I mean, looking at our product and, realizing, hey, we have the distinct ability to maintain an exact temperature. While early on, we saw it as this perfect holding cabinet that could, maintain that perfect temperature to keep product nice and at a nice, precise temperature that it wanted to be at, the optimal temperature. But then, we started thinking, well, if we can hold this precise temperature, why can't we hold this precise temperature through a cooking process? If we wanted to cook an entire prime rib and have it be exactly 135 degrees, why couldn't we put it on our 135 degree induction plate and slow cook it? And through trial and error, I mean, we figured out that, yeah, we can do that. It can be heated to a precise temperature and maintain that temperature. Whether it's coming up through the cooking process and the holding process, there was all kinds of exploration as to, if we're cooking this product at this temperature, what is the outcome versus this product at this temperature? And I mean, there's definitely there's a learning curve as
Mhm.
there is with, any product, but kind of once we understood, what we were capable of doing and what our heat transfer was, and, being able to transfer the heat from the shelf into, a thermal mass of the density of pork, of chicken, of rice, of, mashed potatoes, I mean, you name it. I mean, whether it was us wanting to slow cook a product that we realized that we could do, or whether it was us saying to, a consumer, hey, you don't have to, reheat all your sauces on the stove or all your mashed potatoes and rice in a steamer or redo any of this. You can put it all here in our cabinetry that has a very precise temperature that is a consistent, gentle temperature that can re-thermalize product as well. It was just over the years learning about what the capabilities of our cabinet was and what it could do. And then it's just, educating consumers on what our product is and what it can do. And, you come to us and say, hey, I run this kind of hospitality establishment, whether it's healthcare, school, fine dining, quick service restaurant. My issue is I can't reheat 50 pounds of mashed potatoes for my lunch service, or I can't hold chicken tenders crispy long enough. And, we kind of look at it and say, all right, well, here's our products. Here's what we know our products can do. Then it's, people like me talking to consumers of, hey, this is how we're going to help you. This is how our product is going to exceed your expectations. And this is how we're going to get you to where you want to be and solve your issue that you're having here now.
Well, I have to tell a quick story real quick, Aaron, if you don't mind, which is
Yeah, go ahead.
I live in Texas. I happen to get a chance to go to Goldie's, which is one of the, it's number one Texas barbecue place in the country, or not in the country, but at least in Texas, and they make their brisket. And so I was like, checking out Goldie's. I waited 90 minutes to get to get in the door. The best brisket I've ever had in my life. I recommend anybody. I've got my shirt in my closet. I didn't wear it today, but fantastic brisket. And again, watching my YouTube University, I had a couple of people that had videos that they had learned how they did their stuff, and so they would cook it to a certain temperature, and then they would put it in their holding thing inside of tinfoil for 24 hours. Well, the next time I try to go cook brisket in the backyard, I decided I was going to try and pull that off. Well, unfortunately, my oven and or my smoker wouldn't get down to that temperature, so I had a $40 brisket that got ruined over this darn thing. And again, I mean, I'm teasing about it, but it's true because I know when I took it off the smoker to put and wrap it, it was at the right temperature. I had temped it. I knew it was where it was at, but I couldn't keep that consistent temperature. And so from a consistency perspective, and really that is one of the things that Goldie's talks about is that consistent product that they can deliver day in and day out, week in and week out, because cooking is a science. Cooking is, difficult because you got different cuts of meat, you got different ways that things are going to go about it. But if you can hold it properly, ultimately you can get that consistent product. I guess tell me a little bit both between your culinary background and then now being at Thermodyne. Talk to me a little bit about why that's so important to restaurateurs and why it is in the consumer. I mean, in the minds of restaurants, why they need to have these things because it's critical, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you look at something like brisket or pulled pork or prime rib or top round. I mean, you think it's something that you want to cook, to a very precise temperature, and if you're not able to hold it at temperature you want it to be at, per se. You could overcook something by 10 degrees, or you could hold it, if you want to hold a prime rib at a nice rare, medium rare, 130, 135 degrees, and your cabinet is not well enough insulated, or well, its thermometer on it is off, or any variable that could change the temperature inside that cabinet, you're gonna have unsafe product at that point because you were trying to keep it, at that bottom range of where you want it to be. But if it's not performing optimally or not transferring heat well enough, then you're getting an unsafe product, or you're getting an overcooked product. So I
Mhm.
mean, there's certain aspects where really you want to be able to hold it at that very, very precise temperature. I mean, brisket, another great example. I mean, you put it in, you spend 12, 14 hours, smoking a
Oh,
brisket,
I
making
did.
it, getting it
Oh,
right
I
to where
did.
you want it to be. And then you're in the home stretch, or, you're doing up 20 of them, and you're serving it, cutting it that day. And, your cabinet is off by 30 degrees. You could either have just shredded brisket, or you could have cold brisket, or you could have brisket that's not safe to serve to people. So, I mean,
Yeah.
having,
Or brisket that
the
turns into a hard as a rock because I overcooked the darn thing is ultimately what happened. I threw away
exactly,
the entire
exactly.
flat of my brisket got thrown away. My buddies are, like, laughing at me because the point was fatty enough that it kept the heat okay, but yeah, no, and but I think it's, important for people to understand, which really, I guess, Aaron, leads me down this path that says, "Why don't more people do this?" And again, I was talking to the chef from this other brand that went to these center plate items, and they struggled because, they'd have to stick this top round, or they'd have to stick this prime rib in, they'd season it, they'd stick it in the oven, and if it got overcooked, or it was just the consistency was really, really bad. They had the very same problem with their rack of pork ribs. And as they got to a place where they were using, your guys' product, quite frankly, I don't even know, I know they use your guys' product because he and I talked about it. I didn't know the name of the company, but he was explaining to me how the oven worked. At the end of the day, like, it's become a game changer for this brand because it's a casual dining brand, but they're giving an elevated experience that you can often only find in a place that's chef driven. But it's at a casual dining brand that goes across the country because they're using product like yours. Talk to me a little bit about kind of that whole continuum and why are not more brands not considering using products like what you guys have to deliver proteins in this way, and not just proteins, all of the products that you guys have.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of competitors out there. I mean, Thermodyne is just one of many, many holding cabinets, cook and hold options on the market. So, I mean, it comes out of personal preference. I mean, what people are familiar with, what they've used in the past. But I mean, you get Thermodyne next to, competitors or similar products. And, a big thing we always come down to is a yield test. You
Mhm,
put, I mean, say you're a deli and you're making roast beef and you're serving, 300 pounds of roast beef every day. And I come in and let's say you put your 300 pounds in a Thermodyne oven and you yield 290 pounds of usable product, and competitor comes in and yields 275 pounds. We had 15 pounds better yield. While, add that up over the course of a year, and the yield right there is enough to justify, purchasing a better piece of equipment, a new piece of equipment, different
mhm.
piece of equipment. I mean, yield is a big thing that a lot of people don't always consider. I mean, you really got to be in the industry or around it to understand, like, hey, like, yield is a big thing. Because I mean, just because you buy a 20-pound piece of meat doesn't mean after it's cooked you're getting 21-pound portions of it. You're getting, maybe 16, 17, depending upon what it
Yep.
is. And it's just educating yourself and educating your consumers and your employees that, hey, just because this product turns out, or just because this piece of equipment turns out a great product, doesn't mean that it's going to create us the most profit over time, or it's going to have the most longevity over time. It's understanding what you're using it, what piece of equipment you're using, and what you're using it for, and how it's going to get your ROI back. Of, hey, we invested an extra 20% from this piece of equipment over this piece of equipment, but this piece of equipment over here is going to pay for itself a heck of a lot faster than this one is. Or, hey, the reason we bought this one for more money was because we knew it was going to give us a better yield over the course of a year, and we're going to be in the green past that.
Yeah, no, and I love that concept. It's just, to me, it was one of those things that was really surprising to me when I would talk to restaurateurs, just how, I don't say how few, it's not something that I hear a lot about. I hear a lot about regular fryers and regular ovens, but products like yours, it feels like there's been a bigger push towards them because, again, quality of product and quality
Yeah.
of delivery, and everybody talks about, if you can get consistency, it's critical.
Yeah, I mean, consistency is a big thing, and I mean, especially over the past, 4 or 5 years. I mean, you look at staffing being a big thing. I mean, you think of, you know, people coming in and roasting prime rib in their oven, in their convection oven, for 3 hours for dinner service. Why would you do that when you could have a piece of thermodynamic equipment that could cook it all night long the night before, come in and be ready to go, and you're not tying up your ovens, you're not having to bring prep cooks in an extra hour or 2 early just to get prime ribs cooking. You're not using all that gas from a gas, convection oven. Our equipment is very Energy Star rated, I'm sorry, not Energy Star rated, very efficient when it comes to electricity consumption. Just looking at it from that aspect, it doesn't have to be under a hood, so, I mean, you're saving money on hood space, which these days is anybody that's in
Very
the industry
expensive for it
knows
to get.
it's very, very expensive.
Yep. Well, and I'd love to take that path. Talk to me a little bit about how, not gonna say the product works, because I think you've talked a lot about that, but the energy savings, not just the space savings, throwing that same prime rib in a regular oven takes up a bunch of space. You've got just lots of different, we've had different people on the show in the past about hood cleaning and just all of that. But you guys have, this different methodology that saves energy costs. You're not dealing with, gas and just all of the benefits of having this type of product. You started to allude to it, but let's double click, I guess, on the cost savings because you're keeping stuff at consistent temperatures. It's staying there the time, you're not having a cold heat. I mean, that's a lot of work and a lot of energy dispersed without a whole lot of benefit when you gotta heat an oven up and then cool it down and heat it back up. So talk to me a little bit about what that does for people's overall energy consumption as a restaurant, because that is a huge cost for them.
Yeah, I mean, you look at something, a piece of equipment, and you're looking at how much BTUs it's putting off. You're looking at how much energy it's consuming. You're looking at all different avenues of it. And for ours, I mean, being a slow cook and hold oven or a holding cabinet, I mean, we're not getting above 230 degrees inside the cabinet. So I mean, it's not a piece of equipment where a salamander, or convection oven, or griddle or broiler that's putting off all these BTUs that are pushing out into your kitchen. It's raising the temperature of your kitchen up, and therefore, your air conditioner is working a little bit harder to try and make it somewhat manageable for your staff to be in there as well. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't produce a lot of heat, so therefore, it's helping you in that fashion. And really, I mean, all that's in our cabinetry is a pump and a couple heaters and a tank, and we're just circulating and reheating fluid over and over again. And those heaters are drawing very minimal voltage and amps to them. So I mean, really, it's a cost savings of you don't need the electrical hookups that you would need for a bigger piece of equipment. Everything that we have is single phase, 220 or 110 volt, nothing bigger than that. And really, it just comes down to, the simplicity and the small footprint that we have for a lot of our pieces of equipment. And just with that conduction of the cabinetry, keeping all the heat inside the shelves, we're not losing any heat as the doors come open or close. The only heat you're losing is heat that would come, radiant heat coming off of, hot product already in there. But all that energy is consumed in those shelves, and, it's not going out into your kitchen in that form or fashion. So, I mean, it's really kind of helping keeping the entirety of the cabinet at a consistent temperature.
So Aaron, I'm gonna ask one last question kinda on the cooking and hot product side. You were a chef. And I
Yep.
promise you at some point before you use Thermodyne products, I'm sure you had the belief in your mind that you could do it better. You could do it better through the oven, you could do it better through the BTUs on the steam table, and you're chuckling on video for those that are not watching on video and are listening. Talk to me a little bit about what you would say to that chef that might be classically trained that says, "No, no, no, I need to be able to control the heat. I need the product to be exactly the way that I want it to be the time that it goes out the door." Because I promise you guys have that. I mean, I can only imagine you've got these people that are like, "No, I've done it this way forever. Don't get this stupid new equipment out. Get this new technology out of my face. I've been doing prime rib the same way for 30 years. You're dumb. Let me do what I'm gonna do." Talk to that person that might be listening to the show today because, a crispy outside to a prime rib and a nice soft warm center, like, is something that people want, and, yeah, I know you guys can get that with your product, but a lot of people that are classically trained either don't understand what you guys can do or have their own belief in themselves that they can do it better with the traditional products that we might be used to in the restaurant industry.
Yeah, I mean, I was classically trained, yeah, at culinary school, all the old school French techniques, roasting in the oven. And a lot of it came down to, you look at the process, like we'll take prime rib, great example, great dish. Everybody's had it, everybody loves it, right? Prime rib. And you look at it and you season it, you roast it in the oven, constantly monitoring the temperature of it because you're cooking something, in a hotter oven, 2, 3, 400 degrees, depending upon what kind of method you're using. That's a very hot temperature, and if you forget about it for an extra 5, 10 minutes, you could be degrees over. You could be ruin an entire product, ruin a piece of beef that's hundreds of dollars.
Mhm.
And for something, especially like that, when you look at the more heat you're going to apply to something, the more shrinkage you're going to get. So if you put entire loin in a hot oven, 400-degree oven, let's say even you roast it there and finish it, and you're monitoring it until it's 115 degrees, 120 degrees, 110 degrees, whatever your sweet spot is, and then you say, all right, now we got to pull it out. We got to let it rest for 2 hours. We got to let it do its thing, and as it rests, it'll come up to that 125, 130, wherever you guys want it to be, and then we put it in the holding cabinet to then we serve it dinner that night as we're slicing it. And I could look at you and say, "Okay, that's a great technique. That's a lot of moving parts. That's the way you do it. That's the way you do it." But here, let me show you Thermodyne cabinet here that, I'm gonna put this in the night before, and mine's gonna slow cook overnight, and I'm not adding a whole lot of heat to it. Therefore, I'm gonna have a better yield. I'm gonna break down the meat more because I'm putting it at a lower temperature and cooking it longer. And once mine hits, and you can set it up for it's a 1 or 2 stage cycle of, if you want to get those juices flowing a little bit early, you put it in at 150 degrees or 140 degrees, 170 degrees, whatever that sweet spot is, and set it to where it's going to register a temperature for one of our probes that, is tied directly into the board on our controller that says, okay, this prime rib has been cooking for X amount of time. Now our probe reads 130 degrees. Now it's going to go into a hold cycle or, 120 degrees, 125, whatever your sweet spot is for a prime rib. And it's just going to hold there until you're ready for dinner service tonight. And I come in and my prime rib is cooked, it's ready to go. It's rested and I didn't have to do a darn thing that day.
Mhm.
Whereas competitively, if you're old school, you're slow roasting it, you're pulling it out, you're letting it rest, you're transferring it to another cabinet. Yeah, I mean, it's just a simpler process and I guarantee you, I'm going to get a better yield on my product because it's slow cooked. It's a very
Besides the
gentle heat.
consistency alone, I keep
Mhm.
I keep going back to that product is going to I mean, yes,
Well, I mean,
you're s but every time it's gonna be cooked the same way
yeah,
versus somebody
and
letting it rest for an hour and 50 minutes versus 2 hours and 10 minutes. Just that difference in resting between getting into the cabinet has the
well,
potential
and
to
you look at it too as traditionally you cook it. Your end sides are going to be a little bit more medium well. You're going to get a little bit rare as you get to the center. Whereas if you're using a more gentle cycle, even if you're sous videing, an entire
Mhm.
prime rib, which can be done, it's not optimal to do for. It's not a sustainable way to do it, in my opinion. But
Not for a restaurant doing
you
30 of them a night, right?
yeah, I mean, if you're doing it every once in a while as a special, or you're doing it as a home chef for Christmas dinner, you're like, hey, more power to you. But if you're a high volume restaurant and you want to serve prime rib every night, I would highly suggest getting something in the cook and hold game. Going to make things a lot easier on you. But you know, from something that can do slow cook and hold, you're going to see more consistently even temperature across the board from the end cuts to the middle cut, just because of that lower temperature and not really that harsh heat all around the loin like you would see with like a convection oven or something like that, or smoker even. Whereas when you get more like a gentle cook and hold like Thermodyne has, you're going to see a more consistent product.
Well, I appreciate you going through all of that, and quite frankly, selfishly, I've learned quite a bit, and I want one of these things for my house, and I know I can't. I mean, even though they work in 110, I'm like trying to figure out, all right, how do I work one of these into my home kitchen? Because as my friends all like to tease me, I like to cook a lot, and I enjoy trying out new products. So I know this is cook and hold is not the only thing you guys do. So Aaron, why don't you talk to me a little bit about just kind of some of your other products that you guys have that you guys have got some products related to chilling equipment, holding cabinets, you guys have got more than just this. There's the steam tables. Like, talk to me about kind of your guys' full product line. If somebody were to go check out the website, which we'll direct them to here in a few minutes, what else are they going to find? And let's talk a little bit about, some of those other products.
Yeah, I mean, all the technology is the same in all of our products. I mean, the theory of we're taking a liquid and getting it to a very precise temperature and maintaining that temperature is the real advantage for all of our products. Really, for us, what we distinguish as more of a cook and hold unit is something that's going to have our newer touchscreen smart controller in there. that allows us to go from a cooking temperature to a holding temperature. So, for instance, like if you want to do, let's say, pulled pork, that you need to get that pulled pork to 200 degrees for it to shred. You put it at you get your recipe built in there and you put it at 200 degrees for 12 hours. And then after your 12-hour mark or after your pro reach 200 degrees, it drops down to maybe like a 145, 150 to kind of hold it there as a holding. So really you're seeing more of a cook and hold there. Whereas with
Mm,
our traditional cabinetry, it's just a simple controller of, up and down set temperature. And it's a very reliable, it's a very strong piece of equipment that you're getting an even consistent temperature. There's not a cold spot, hot spot, don't put something on the top shelf, don't put something on the bottom shelf because that's a cold spot or that's a hot spot or something like
yep.
that. I mean, it's consistent from top to bottom, front to back, and really you're able to optimize space at that point. And when we say, hey, you can hold X amount of hotel pans in our cabinetry, we mean you can hold X amount and that they're all going to be consistently the same type of product or temperature as well. So, kind of elaborate more on other pieces of equipment. We do have units that is a steam well on top that has Thermodyne down below it, Thermodyne holding cabinet. And really, where we see that used a lot in is back of the house operations for a lot of restaurants, but schools and healthcare that, hey, we're
Yeah.
mass serving, 400 patients a day or 2,000 students a day. And, I know I need, um, 5 pans of mashed potatoes or 5 pans of rice pilaf. You put your one up here on the steam well and you have your backups right there below you. It's not a holding cabinet behind you. And especially for, schools that are serving satellite lunches, whether it's
Yep.
prepared, over here in the commissary cafeteria, and then they're wheeling that entire piece of equipment, down the hallway or down to across the courtyard or wherever their satellite kitchen is set up at. This wheel in one whole vessel, setting it all up. With a lot of our accessory packages, you can have it to where you get tray slides, plate holders, sneeze guard, anything you would need to set up a mobile serving line. Serve your students there, pack it back down, wheel it back over, and that's their versatile serving line as well. Um, and then the last piece of equipment, we have what's called a dual purpose unit. Basically a Thermodyne holding cabinet that then has a refrigerator condenser on the bottom. And really, kind of what that allows us to do is using programmable controller. Let's say, for instance, you're running a nursing home or a hotel or any sort of a large venue, large catering, and you have breakfast for 500 people every morning, or an event for that, or it's a hospital or nursing home that serves the same 100, 200 patients every day. Really, you're able to put that product in there the night before, put it on a chill cycle, and program it to have a rethermalization cycle kick on at 3, 4, 5 in the morning, whatever it needs to be. And it goes from that chill state to then heater tank up top is kicking on. It's heating that fluid now, so the refrigerator condenser cools that liquid, and we're just using conduction, put
Uh-huh.
cold fluid through there, keep all the product nice and cool. And then once that controller switches from a chiller state to a rethermalization state, that liquid is then getting heated, and we're pumping that through the shells, and we're rethermalizing the product after it comes into that heating cycle. So basically, cooks, chefs, anybody can come in, 20, 15 minutes before they're going to serve stuff, open the cabinet door, pull it out, put it in the serving line, and everything's ready to go. Whether, oatmeal, hash browns, grits, anything that can be thermalized, you can put in that cabinetry the night before, set it on that cycle, and it's going to save you got, think about it. If you save
Yeah.
30 minutes every cook every day, whether it's they don't have to come in quite as early, or you can get away with doing with 2 cooks what normally used to take you 4, it's a cost savings there. And, we've done cost analysis on that for different operations that say, hey, if you replace 1 employee or if you replace, 30 minutes a day with 4 employees, this piece of equipment will pay for itself in a year.
Yeah. Super, super quick. Well, and that I guess leads me I know I said I was done asking questions, but as you were talking through that, I'd love to understand for those that are less familiar with this style of cooking, do you guys have ways to help them? I'm a chef for a group of restaurants. I got 20 restaurants. I'm want to buy your guys' equipment and I want my Friday night special to be prime rib, but I don't know how to make prime rib other than a traditional oven. Or I'm that nursing home and I know that I want to be able to do this. Is that stuff that you guys as part of your deployment are willing and able to help these people with on how to use your guys' equipment and how it's gonna, if I'm a listener out there and I'm like, I really want this, but I don't have a clue how the heck I would use it even if I had it. How,
Mm.
help our audience understand what that would look like.
Yeah, I mean, we have a whole library of resources on our website, from recipes to procedures to um, various operational things for it as well. But really, if you have a niche or you have a project that you're trying to accomplish, I mean, getting in contact with us, and we have a full team here of chefs and salespeople, engineers that can kind of help walk you through every scenario, as well as a full on production kitchen. And we do a lot of hands on demos. We do Zoom calls, Teams calls, webinars, just kind of educating people on our product and kind of troubleshooting it. And like you said, like, people approach us like, hey, I'd really love to be able to, I serve all you can eat fish on Friday nights and I can't keep up with my fryers, but I don't want to pre-fry all my fish because then it loses quality. 'Cause I've never found that right piece of equipment. That's when we kind of get our chef team involved. We get our sales people involved. Hey, why don't you guys, tell us a little bit about your procedure. What are you doing? What's the recipe? What kind of fish you using? How long you want to hold it for? Ideally, is 10, 15 minutes a game changer for you if you can hold that long, or does it need to be, 30 to 45 minutes? Tell us about your project. And then from there, we really go to work and, kind of um, do more of an analysis of, all right, here's their gap. The
Hmm.
gap is, hey, we need to be able to cook and hold more fish. All right, now we're going to kind of go to work and see what we can get done. And, hey, here's our best feedback. Here's our input of, hey, if you use this Thermodyne with this configuration of pans and lids and grates and risers and all kinds of accessories that we offer, and you hold it at this temperature, we feel that the ideal time is 12 to 15 minutes. It is still as good as straight out of the fryer, but at 20 to 25 minutes, you're losing a little bit of texture. In our opinion, it's probably not ideal to keep it that long. That's our feedback. Here's our presentation as to what we think it is. From there, then it's in your court as to how you feel about it. And I mean, we do offer demos as well. We really believe that seeing is believing, and with our product, it is a little bit different than anything else that's out there. So I mean, for customers, we will say, hey, 60-day trial, give our piece of equipment a try. If you like it, great, you can purchase it. If not, ship it back. No hard feelings, but we appreciate you trying it out. And we hope that you love the product, but we understand, business is business and people have decisions to make on their own. But we have a very high success rate of people seeing our product and realizing like, oh my gosh, this makes my life so much easier. Whether it's the dual purpose unit of putting product in the night before and being able to come in and it's hot and ready, or, the quick service of, hey, this induction heat really holds my fish nice and crispy, or hey,
Yeah.
we could pre-fry 100 chicken wings on Monday night and we never run out, and we have 7-minute ticket times on wing baskets. So it's a big variety of things that we can offer. And, we have a team here that's been here for a long time and very knowledgeable on the subject, whether it's operations of restaurant or whether it's how equipment works or just the demands of the people in the hospitality industry. And we try to relate to them as best as we can and try and close those gaps for them.
I love that. I love that, and it doesn't hurt that the origin stories come from, Colonel Sanders, so there's always that. So, Aaron, you alluded to the website. Why don't you throw that out there for our audience? How do they get in touch with you? How do they get in touch with your team to learn more about what you guys can do for people? Because, if I had a commercial kitchen, I promise you I'd be figuring out how to get one of these, and I'm still trying to figure out how to get one of these showing up to the house. Showing up to the house. Just don't tell my wife. She'd be like, "What the heck is that thing? What do you need that
Yeah.
thing for?" So
Yeah.
so how do they get in
Um,
touch with you? How do they get in touch with your team and learn more about what you guys can do for them?
Yeah, so the website is tdyne.com. You go on there, there's a whole list of, like I said, resources of products, spec sheets, how-to videos, recipe videos, just kind of showing the utilization of the product. All of our numbers are on there, whether it's parts, service, sales, anything like that. Give us a call. We'd be happy to help you guys out. Our request a demo form is on there. If you think you have a niche to start cooking prime rib, but you really want to try it first, fill that form out. It goes directly to me. I'll get in touch with you and get the ball rolling.
I love it. I love it. Well, I appreciate you educating me and making me envious that I don't have a commercial kitchen here at home. But yeah. Oh, I just did the outdoor kitchen. I've got the pizza oven, I got the flat top, and I got the grill, and I got the smoker. And my wife's like, "You're done. You're done with cook equipment. Every time I show up, there's always something." So, Aaron, thank you so much for sharing. To our audience, guys, I know I shared this at the onset. You guys have lots of choices, so we appreciate you guys spending time with us. If you haven't already subscribed to the show, please do so, whether you're listening on audio on your favorite podcast player or on YouTube. One last thing that I would ask you to subscribe to is once a month we send out a newsletter. with all of the shows and any other blog posts and anything else that's going on with restaurant technology, guys. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us and to our audience. Make it a great day.